click the record button here and move back over here to our guests today. Let me narrow down the camera so I can just get their faces in the camera here, because they love being on camera. Both of them do. And it's Mark Thigpen and Mark Patterson. It's the Mark and Mark show today. So they ran Derek off. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Tim.
Thank you. All right. So tell us what's going on at the sheriff's office. I know it's cold weather now. Well, last night was our first night of cold weather. So there's a program that the sheriff's office offers that a lot of people may not know about.
That's correct, Tim. That's the Senior Citizen Firewood Program, but I'm going to pass that off to Captain Patterson because that's his expertise and his end of the end zone. So I'll let him run with that.
Yeah, we just wanted to remind everybody that we do have that program, and we try to provide firewood to senior citizens and people that's maybe disabled or something like that. Mm-hmm. If anybody that fits those, just give me a call, 837-2521, and ask for me, and I'll get it set up to get a load delivered to you.
837-2521. Now, that is a great service, and I have a big heart for our senior citizens. They've worked hard all their lives and may not be able to go out and do things like they used to when they were younger. So it's great and refreshing to see communities giving back to those who have given to us all these years. So we just want to thank you for that service. And a lot of people may not realize all the good things the sheriff's office is doing for our community, and we just want to thank you and recognize some of those things.
You know, Captain doesn't he doesn't talk a lot. He doesn't brag on himself or take much credit for things, but the inmate work crew has actually been working all summer, actually all year, in stockpiling this wood. Mm-hmm. And they've got a wood yard that if you go see it, it's quite the operation to watch the detention officers that oversee that program teaching these inmates how to properly cut wood, because they do it from beginning to end. They go out, if somebody's got a tree that needs to be removed off of their property, or it's fell and they need it cleaned up and they want to donate it to that program, they take these guys out. They teach them how to maintain the saws and the wood splitter. And it's not just somebody showing up and dumping a load of wood in your yard. It is truly taking these inmates and working them from the beginning of the process all the way to the end. And it's a great service not only to our community, but mm-hmm. to those inmates to work with them on skill sets and being productive for our community.
Well, very good. By the way, folks, we have a student from Western Carolina in the studio with us. His name is Patrick Gray, and he is shadowing here this hour to learn more about and just get more involved into the radio. And he's going to be, is your major in broadcasting? Is yes. It? Okay, so he's paying attention very closely to this interview, because probably at the very end, I'm going to probably put him on the spot to ask questions as well. All right, is that a good plan, Patrick?
Sure.
All right. Well, at the meeting in Andrews the other night, folks were expressing concerns about things going on and things not getting done. But one of the problems is they're not reporting things immediately. And we just want to make people aware, when you do see something going on criminal-wise, to call an emergency line, not an email address or a tip line. But if there's something going on right now that needs attention, what do they need to do?
They need, if it is a ongoing crime, our recommendation is to call directly to 911. If it's not something that maybe you would consider of an emergency nature, then it would be to call our non-emergency number, which is 835-3144. Either way, though, that gets directly into the dispatch center. Mm-hmm. And Tim, one of the problems we have is we have a published tip line number. It's on our web page, and if a lot of people, if they call the number that's published in the phone book, or if you do a Google search to the sheriff's office and you call the 2589 number after hours, there's nobody there to answer it. Mm-hmm. So it rolls over usually to the tip line unless you know an extension that you're looking for. And the problem with that is that tip line is not a manned line. It goes to all of our investigative staff. The sheriff gets it, I get it, all of our other supervisors get it, but it triggers in as an email. So, I've got to go and sort through my email, and I may pull that up and say, oh, we have a tip line call, and listen to it. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard things like somebody call and say, I'm following this vehicle with this tag number, and they're all over the road. I think they're drunk. Mm-hmm. Well, by the time I answer that email or look at that email and I turn around and call dispatch, the time span is made it virtually impossible to catch up to that car or find it. And depending on what all of the investigators and supervisors have going on, it may even be the next day, or if it's over the weekend, it may be a couple days before somebody answers that. I know we have several investigators that are good at monitoring that, and they'll forward it to dispatch, that information, but that time lapse is critical to get that information to dispatch so they can get it out immediately, especially if it's a crime in progress.
What emergency constitutes calling 911? What kind of things does that cover?
We would consider a drunk driver, severely reckless driving, breaking and enterings in progress, assaults in progress. I mean,
anything life-threatening too.
Life-threatening, anything that needs immediate attention. The tip line's great if our investigators have posted something on our Facebook page or our web page that says we're looking for this person or we're looking for this information. People see it and they call into the tip line, and that's what it's designed for. It's perfect for that. Or if they hear something on the street that may be related to drug activity, but it's not something they know personally or saw personally. It's information they think would help investigators move forward on their cases. That's what that's really designed for.
I see that every time we publish a press release about calling the tip line. Maybe we should reword that to the non-emergency tip line. If you have a real emergency, call 911. Maybe we can just change the disclaimer there so folks have a better understanding.
I think that's a great idea, and we've had some technical issues with the recording on our tip line, but even before we had problems with what's recorded on there, it went through a series of if this is an emergency, hang up and dial 911. But we still would get people, and I think maybe they just were annoyed by having to listen through the message, and they would still hang on and give their tip when it was really something that should have went immediately to dispatch to be handled appropriately.
Now, there's a lot of times people call 911 when they shouldn't. I know I've gotten several calls or emails from 911 and asking folks not to call. For example, if there's a power outage, 911's not the number to call for that.
Correct.
And one of the most hilarious ones I've posted that people really enjoyed was, if your internet is out, don't call 911. They have gotten calls about their internet being out. So call the providers unless a power outage is really a life-threatening situation, like a tree has fallen on your house at the time.
You're elderly and you're on an oxygen machine, and it's causing you an immediately health hazard. But it's people really don't fully grasp or understand what goes on the other side of that phone and the other side of the radio and the dispatch, and it is. It's humorous to an extent, but it also is time-consuming and detrimental to the effectiveness of the dispatch center for the calls that come in there. People call about the weather. Is it going to snow today on 911? Well, call WKRK's
we'll tell you,
weather line, and they'll let you know what the weather's going to be. So it does get misused way more frequently than people really think it does.
By the way, our weather line number is 835-3200. All right. So if you want to jot that down, you can call that 24 hours a day, and that'll give you the forecast, and we have it on our website as well.
You know, Tim, you mentioned like power lines down or power out. And what people don't realize is in the midst of a storm or the midst of some event that's going on, if you don't have an emergency and you're calling 911 on a typical shift, we have 3 dispatchers in the 911 center, and it is not uncommon during any kind of those events that the number of phone calls that come into that 911 center just explode, and so for every non-emergency call that they're having to stop and answer, it's delaying the response of answering the true 911 calls. So not only are you clogging up the non-emergency, non-essential services there, but you could be blocking that 911 call from being effectively answered and processed because you want to report your internet or your telephone or whatever it may be.
Honestly, lives are at stake. So by tying up the 911 line for something that's not an emergency, someone could actually die waiting to get through to someone to help.
That's correct. And we really wasn't our intentions of where we were going to go today, but you've opened a door that we'll run with. A lot of times we'll get some complaints during the midst of a major emergency that the dispatchers were rude or they were short with people. We had an incident several years ago. It was during one of our sudden snowstorms, and there were just wrecks everywhere. And those dispatchers are having to answer and prioritize those calls as quickly as they can. So on a normal day, when there's not hundreds of calls coming in, they can take that little longer time and maybe be a little more personable. But when you're in the midst of a disaster or something that has just triggered the whole community or a particular area of our community into calling in, they've got to make it as quick as possible. And I understand that. I've sat on that side of the phone and the radio, but even to me, I called in last night. We were working on an operation out last night. I needed some information from dispatch. They know my number when it comes up on that screen. They know that that's the chief deputy calling. But what I got last night was hold, please. And I went to my in-car computer, looked, and saw that they had several emergency calls going on. I have the benefit of being able to look and see what's going on, but the public needs to understand that there's a host of things going on behind the scenes that they're not necessarily being rude or
there's just not time for that Southern hospitality.
That's right, and so they're trying to make sure they're getting that ambulance or that fire truck or that patrol car to where it needs to go, and that may mean that they have to be a little shorter and a little quicker with you on the phone than they would be under normal circumstances.
And plus, they have this process where they have to ask the important questions to get the proper services to people that need there. And people get annoyed by answering all those questions, but they're important.
They are very important, and primarily a lot of it is deals with what they call the emergency medical dispatch protocol, and all of our dispatchers are trained and certified in what we call shortened down EMD, and that gives them a list of things that lets them know what resources you need for your medical emergency. And it lets them know, do we need to look at putting a helicopter on standby, and it gives them information to give the paramedics that are responding to any specific emergency as to, what are you going to be coming into? What do you need to grab off of your ambulance to take into the house because you know that this person has failed the stroke protocols, or they've done all the process for a heart attack and they have had no relief, or they're at risk of going into cardiac arrest. So all of those questions are very, very important in ensuring that the people on the other end get the most adequate, quickest, and effective emergency medical care.
It also gives them a chance to analyze the tone of the caller's voice too, and you can hear the sense of urgency in some, or the lack of urgency in just the tone of voice. Plus, there's a situation of having to keep officers and first responders safe too. And for example, a hostage or standoff situation, you have to be able to understand that whole situation before you send a lot of folks in there.
That's correct. We had an incident just earlier in the week that necessitated what we call staging the paramedics and the rescue personnel because we weren't sure that the situation was safe for them to go in. They're going into these situations without any type of protective equipment as far as body armor or weapons. And so there's a process during that taking of that call that the dispatcher determines we need to stage them at a safe location until a deputy, a policeman, or whoever with the proper resources can get there and can verify that scene is safe for them to come in. Last thing we want is to send in a volunteer first responder or a paid paramedic and then become a victim, because then as opposed to being there to help the initial victim, now we have multiple victims. So there's a lot that goes into the dispatcher sorting that information out and deciding this is what we need to do or this is what we don't need to do. And it's quite, sometimes it's lengthy. I mean, they try to do it as quick as they can, but as you said, it all has a reason behind it. It's not just arbitrarily asking crazy questions.
Right. All right. What else do we want to talk about, inform our public about today?
Well, I think that it would be prudent for us to remind people that we've just rolled through Fire Prevention Week, and as we start into the winter months and those things, that we want to remind people in our cooperative relationship we have with the fire departments in the community to make sure that they're changing their batteries in their smoke detectors, and that as we start to use different heat sources, that they have working carbon monoxide detectors. If you're burning wood, that the detention center may be providing you to make sure that you've had your chimneys and your flues inspected, that they're not stopped up and create a hazard. We just have a host of things. As we start seeing winter weather move in, we start seeing an additional different type of calls that relate to heating accidents and carbon monoxide and those kind of things. And so now's the time of year to start preparing for those things.
And always at time change period when daylight saving times ends, especially when it ends in the winter months. We love to remind folks to change their batteries. And recently I had Kevin Carter on, and some folks laughed at me because of a statement that just came out the wrong way. But I said, we don't always think about having fire extinguishers here because our buildings aren't on fire every day. So it's something that we just, we think about it once or twice a year, but it's very, very important to know. And I don't check the smoke detector to see if it's working, and I need to do that monthly.
Another thing that and I have a history with the fire department, that, but is that we often forget too that smoke detectors wear out. So if you're not testing them and you're not changing the batteries when you need it, they may not work. So each manufacturer, there's recommendations on when you actually need to replace them and put whole new smoke detectors up. So those are things this time of year that we want people to think about. Sheriff's office is all about law enforcement, but we're a public safety family, whether it's EMS, fire, rescue, dispatch, detention center. We're all one big group, and our goal is for our community to be safe and sound. All right. Mark Patterson, what do you want to talk about?
I thought we already talked about the firewood.
I love to put Mark Patterson on the spot. He just loves talking on the radio.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Patrick, what kind of question would you like to ask our sheriff's office here today? We've got a microphone for you right there, and I just love the expression. And first of all, we want to welcome you to the studio, and this is the first time I've met Patrick. And what are you thinking about radio so far and the interview processes that we go through to just this show right here is just as a public service to keep our folks informed of things going on around the community. What are your thoughts?
Well, Thanks for having me on the show, and I'm enjoying it so far, learning about the production side of it and what goes on behind the scenes. You said earlier about how like when it moves into the winter, how calls can change to more like for like heating and stuff situations. And I'd never think that like the seasons would change, like the different kind of calls and stuff. Would you see that like?
It really does, and even we've not reached the real cold time, but over the years we've had an increase of homeless population, so we even have those things to consider as to the temperatures, and that we have situations where we have churches in our homeless shelter that open doors up for our homeless people, and we even have to think about sending deputies out to check our homeless areas to tell those people, hey, we've got a place for you to go. Don't sleep under this bridge or under this tree tonight. So the seasons do change, just like during the heat of the summer, you see more heat stroke calls and heat-related injuries and
snake bites.
So the seasons change our types of calls as well as it does the temperatures.
All right, and I went to the first class last night. I was the Citizens Law Enforcement Academy. I had to miss the first one because of the debates that were going on the previous week before I had to film those. But Stephanie Swanson gave a wonderful presentation last night about domestic violence and what is the name of her program? It's the Victims Advocacy. Tell us about how that works. She did a wonderful job. I told her, I said, be prepared for Facebook Live one day soon. So
Yeah.
Tell us about the Victims Advocacy here on the radio for folks that weren't there last night.
Well, Stephanie Swanson is our full-time victim advocate, and she has a host of volunteers that assist her. And their primary function, it kind of started, it was driven more towards domestic violence, but it's evolved, and it's for victims of any crime. And what that unit does is, one, make sure that the victim is getting the services they need, whether it's from the court services, if it's from REACH, or from any of our other community partners that assist victims based on what their situation is. And then they actually, if the victim wants them to, will accompany them and attend court sessions with them and help them understand the court process. We all know that process is very confusing. It's confusing to us sometimes.
Especially if you haven't gone through it before. I mean, there's some professionals out there who've gone through it several times that have learned how to
correct.
how to use and abuse the system. But if you've never gone through that system, it's like
a nightmare.
It's different language than we're used to using every day. She was talking about those folks who move here that may speak Spanish, but they know English. But once you get into the court system, it's a different level of language, of the English language, that they're not used, and we're not used to using either. And I never thought about that before.
And so her program has resources that they can help with interpreters if they need them. They help them understand what services the actual court system provides, and how to accomplish getting those services available to them. There's certain services and certain things that take place that you have to ask for. It's not just automatically, if you're a victim, you have to make sure that the district attorney's office is that you want these particular things done for you. And so they'll attend every court session with these victims and walk them through the process. They help with getting them situated at REACH if it's a female that needs shelter, with the Family Resource Center for things with children and families. And it's just a whole host of things that for anyone who's been a victim, they can sit down with them. They'll have a consultation with them, understand what's going on with them, and then guide them which directions they need to go. And for some people, it's even a matter of coming in and saying, this happened to me, and I'm not sure I want to take it to the court system. What are my other options? And they'll lay those options out for them.
Yeah, we learned quite a bit last night, and it was very interesting. a lot of folks were upset and concerned about how cases are continued until folks just get worn down and don't care anymore.
And don't show up, and then they end up getting dismissed. And it is the captain and I were just discussing earlier that in the detention center, they're housing people that have been waiting years to go to trial. Not months, years. And those are things that have changed over time. When I started in this, the court system moved much faster, but we didn't have near the number of people on the docket that we do now.
Yeah, if you go and just get a docket for that day's court, approximately how many names are on that document?
I saw one of our district court dockets came through the other day, and it had over 300 people scheduled for one day worth of court.
Wow. And there's no way that many people can
It's
go
not going
through
to
it.
happen.
So they've got to just rearrange and continue some procrastinate, as I like to say.
They have a system of prioritizing and processing those. We don't always understand or agree with it, but that's their job.
It is the system that we have.
That's correct.
All right. Well, anything else? I see our time has quickly come and gone. Anything else that you would like to?
Captain Patterson just talks a lot.
Yeah. I understand that you're going to sing, right? What song were you going to sing today?
Well, I was going to sing Amazing Grace, but I forgot how it starts out.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of the show today, and we always love having you both here on the Mark and Mark show today, as we have it today, and we look forward to seeing you real soon.
We appreciate it. Thank you, Mike.
All right, folks, we're going to end our Facebook Live feed, and I'll push the button for the radio broadcast in just a moment. You're tuned to 105.5 FM, 1320 AM, cable TV channel 25, and worldwide at country.am. Our time is 11:30.